back to the very beginnings. This was really, the place to be by gunsmith John Dowd in Goshen, Connecticut. So he died in March, and he was going to be buried, and they're looking.
My name is Walter Hard, and I'm Vermont's storekeeper poet. I was born in Manchester, Vermont, May 3rd, 1882, to Jesse and Eliza Hard. I'm the 5th generation of Hards in the Battenkill Valley. My father, Jesse Hard, in 1884, opened J.H. Hard, Drugs, Stationery, and Fancy Goods, a business my family successfully ran for 51 years. Now, in 1900, I proudly graduated from Burr and Burton Seminary and went on to Williams College, where I planned to study journalism. With the untimely death of my father in my 3rd year, I reluctantly yet dutifully returned home to run the family business. Not satisfied with the bookstore, I continued to pursue my literary dreams. And in 1924, I began writing a column for the Manchester Journal called Fouls and Base Hits, which was regularly reprinted in the Rutland Herald under the title Hard Lines and Old Bits. Not really satisfied with the sketches and prose in that column, well, I began to amend it with short, unrhymed poems that sort of filled out the piece. Now, surprisingly, it was those poems that gave me the ability to distill and share the years of observation of people and dynamics in small-town Vermont. In 1924, I published my first book of stories called Some Vermonters, and in 1930, I published my first book of poems. Now, the literary world would continue to be the focus for my entire family. And in 1935, I finally shed that drugstore and became the owner of Johnny Appleseed Bookstore, a business my daughter Ruth had started 5 years previously with the hopes of understanding books as a business before going into publishing herself. My wife Margaret and I began writing a book together called This Is Vermont, and it was published in 1936. It was sort of a guidebook to Vermont, but written as a conversation. Now, by the time my life came to an end in 1967, I had written 9 books of poetry, 2 books of prose, and, well, that article of mine was being regularly published in periodicals and newspapers from Boston to Chicago. In addition to poet and storekeeper, well, I did manage to contribute to Vermont's well-being in additional ways. I was proudly elected to represent Manchester, Vermont in Vermont's state legislature 2 times, and 3 times lucky enough to be elected to state senate. In addition, locally, I served as officer, director, and trustee to countless organizations, including but not limited to the Mark Skinner Library, the Manchester Historical Society, and Dellwood Cemetery. Now, in closing, I would like to read you a poem I wrote. In 1931, there was a great elm tree at the intersection of Route 7 and Bonnet Street, and it was decided that it would be taken down in order to pave the road. And this is some of my thoughts on that event. Of course, a tree is just so much timber, or so many cords of firewood. The timber may make a home, or the firewood may keep it warm. But a tree like the elm at the crossroads has seen too much of life to just be timber for firewood. There it is with its thick trunk on the ground. They're chopping out the branches and digging across the broad stumps. Count the rings. 108. I could tell you a lot of history. It was young when Factory Point was beginning. There was the tannery along the river with piles of bark in the yard. There was the woolen mill with its whirling looms and a dozen other mills along the stream. It really was Factory Point. Think of all the people who have passed that tree. Think of all the people. Think of the slow, plodding oxen with loads of goods, heavy, creaking wagons with blocks of marble from quarries on Dorset Mountain, gay, prancing horses drawing shining buggies, processions in somber black. Gay parades with bands and flying banners. Ladies walking with parasols held over quaint bonnets. Men with high hats and tailed coats. Statesmen, scholars, warriors, artists, all have passed under its spreading branches. And there it lies, just so many cords of firewood. Of course, it had to go. It's a martyr to what we hope is progress. Our rushing life cannot be stopped by a tree. 108 years to grow some firewood. Thank you.